the census of India does not define rural. It's a very peculiar thing. 225 Indian languages have died in the last 50 years, according to the People's Linguistic Survey. No major newspaper, no major channel has a full-time labor correspondent on its rolls anymore. How you define national daily? National daily is defined as any newspaper that has one edition, even if it is the only edition, if it is coming out from Delhi. So that what comes out from there is national daily. The rest of us are anti-national. What happened in the pandemic? The biggest human migration seen in history, and the Attorney General of this nation stands in the Supreme Court on March 31st, 2020, and swears a sworn affidavit given to the Supreme Court saying, as of today, 11:30 a.m. March 2020, there is not a single migrant on the highways. 14 days later, the same gentleman gives another affidavit before the Supreme Court saying, so many hundreds of food relief centers have been opened for the migrants. Where did those migrants suddenly come from? The real question was not why are they going back? The real question was why did they leave their villages in the first place and come here? And the answer was two words: agrarian crisis. The only index that the government of India accepts as true is the Forbes index. How well we have done. An Indian is the third richest man in the world. So we are very proud of that. Your economy shrank 7.7%. Your GDP shrank 7.7% in the first year of the pandemic in India. In the first 12 months, Indian billionaires doubled their wealth to $800 billion, or 24% of the GDP at that point. So did that happen by welfarism? It happened by loot and expropriation and exploitation. In the early 1980s, when Tamil Nadu pioneered the midday meal, I remember the cartoons in newspapers making fun. You know, there were cartoons in all the national dailies showing all the teachers will become cooks. 10 years later, the United Nations holds up Tamil Nadu's midday meal scheme as a model for the world to follow. 73,000 crores on corporate income tax. Do you know how many rupees we have given to the top 1% of the population? That's a freebie. During the pandemic, August 2020, my dear, you had 104 million tons of so-called surplus food grain sitting in the buffer stock. 104 million tons. What did we do? 5 kilograms per person. And what did we do with the rest? We exported it. Women in Kerala, rural women in Kerala and internet do better than men in Gujarat. I'm honored to be the inaugural speaker of this series. On a personal note, may I begin by thanking the Tamil Nadu government for honoring, and in the 75th year of our independence, for honoring two freedom fighters still living in this city as Thagaisal Tamilans, N. Sankaraya and R. Nallakkan. The way the history of our freedom struggle has been written, it's as if it all happened up north, which is simply not true. Resistance to British colonialism was happening in Tamil Nadu and in Bengal long before the first shot was fired in the Hindi heartland. So it's very, very important. And both of them, I'm also personally pleased because both of them are in my latest book, The Last Heroes, Foot Soldiers of Indian Freedom, which will come in Tamil within 4 to 6 months. Now, why do we talk about rural India? Why do we need to talk about rural India was this, I think, how the issue was posed to me. It's very simple. At the base of it, you're talking about 69% of your population. If there is no rural India, there is no India. Yeah? You need to discuss it. because it is the largest part, more than 2/3 of our population are from rural India. Though as many of you as administrators and policy makers know, that the census of India does not define rural. It's a very peculiar thing. The census defines what is urban. And the census tells you honestly, whatever doesn't fit into the urban definition becomes rural. So in a way, actually, though that's peculiar, it gives us some leeway as activists, as thinkers, as policy makers, as collectors, as executives. It gives some leeway for us to more loosely define and approach things flexibly. But 69% of your population. Second, rural India is without a doubt the most complex part of planet Earth. 780 living languages according to the People's Linguistic Survey of India. Out of those 780 languages, 8 are spoken by more than 50 million human beings. 4 are spoken by more than 80 million, and 1 is spoken by nearly 500 million. At the other end of the spectrum are small Adivasi tribal languages on the verge of disappearing. Just 3-4 years ago, the last speaker of the Jeru language in the Andamans, a lady, she died. The language dies with her. 225 Indian languages have died in the last 50 years, according to the People's Linguistic Survey. That means, for me, I wake up, I don't get intimidated and frightened by multiplicity of languages. I wake up and think I'm a very rich person to be living in a society with so many languages. Yeah. And when you see the rate of decline, 225 languages dead in 50 years, that is on average one language dying every 90 days. It's extremely important to preserve that diversity of our languages and some of the most beautiful and ancient languages in the world. I really hope that policymakers and that executives and all of you who are involved in governance will resist the mindless imposition of one language that is now underway in this country. Do not accept it, do not enforce it, do not accelerate it, resist it. You have a beautiful language, and which is one of the most ancient languages in the world. And, apart from the diversity of languages in this country, there is the diversity of occupations. There are occupations in South Asia, well, there are occupations in Tamil Nadu and Kerala and coastal India, which exist nowhere else in the world. Some schools of weaving, like for instance, today we can't call them toddy tappers because that's been banned, but palm tree climbers, Pannayeri nadars, I mean these occupations are extraordinary. Yeah, I'm not saying that they should continue in the way they are, certainly not. We need to engage with them. Where and in which other occupation does a man climb 5,500 feet in a day, 50 trees 3 times daily, which is greater than the height of the Empire State Building in New York? Okay. Now, the bulk of this workforce is in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and coastal Andhra. The bulk of this workforce. And you have a diversity of, one thing that saddens me, in the diversity of occupations, no nation on earth has so many schools of weaving and pottery as India does. But they are in severe decline and distress. It always pains me when I'm coming to Tamil Nadu, the state I was born in and raised, that you will not find today, you will find it very difficult to spot a Tamil weaver, Tamilian who is a weaver on the Kanjivaram sari. I mean, that is the queen of saris. Okay? And it belongs to Tamil Nadu, but you will find it very difficult. Mostly it will be done by Padmashalis who have come in because the weavers of Tamil Nadu have given up on it. And I really think that this is one of the most incredible ancient weaving arts that should be bolstered, otherwise it will also die. That diversity of this country, the diversity within Tamil Nadu, those things we really need to. Oh, I should mention that you can walk out into the Pandi Bazaar and elsewhere today and buy a Chinese Kanjivaram sari, machine made, 1/4 the cost of your handmade sari. But who the hell wants a machine made sari? But they are selling. They are going to further kill your Kanjivaram sari. The other reason, the third reason why we need to be speaking of rural India is because the media don't. Do you know that no major newspaper, no major channel has a full-time labor correspondent on its rolls anymore? When I came to journalism in 1980 September, every newspaper had a labor and employment correspondent. Okay? Not one now. Not a single newspaper has a full-time farming correspondent. They have what they call agriculture correspondent, a glorified individual who sits in Delhi and covers the agriculture ministry and sometimes only the agriculture minister. You know? But not farming from the perspective of the farmer, not from the fields, from the farms, from the mandis. They don't do that. If we are not going to talk about farmers and laborers, if we are not going to talk, we are making the statement, the media are telling you that 75% of the population don't matter. They don't make news, except of course at election time, when you have to start giving them some respect. Do you know what percentage of your national dailies give to the rural India on the front page? The average national daily, that itself is a joke, how you define national daily. National daily is defined as any newspaper that has one edition, even if it is the only edition, if it is coming out from Delhi. So that what comes out from there is national daily. The rest of us are anti-national. Yeah. So the average national daily in this country, the space on the front page given to rural India, 5 years average, 0.67%. 0.67% to 69% of the average, and even that is an exaggeration because 5-year average of 0.67% includes 1 year, which is election year, when rural India will be covered because that's where the votes are, unfortunately for those who rule us. You have to then, for the media, you then have to give us some space over there. Yet another reason, look at what happened to this country, how ill-informed we were and how ill-informed we remain on what happened in the pandemic. What happened in the pandemic? The biggest human migration seen in history, and the Attorney General of this nation stands in the Supreme Court on March 31st, 2020 and swears a sworn affidavit given to the Supreme Court saying, as of today, 11:30 a.m. March 2020, there is not a single migrant on the highways. Not a single migrant. 14 days later, the same gentleman gives another affidavit before the Supreme Court saying, so many hundreds of food relief centers have been opened for the migrants. Where did those migrants suddenly come from? Do you know how many people moved? On May 26, 2020, the Indian Railways put out a press release proudly boasting, and I'm all for the Indian Railways. I'm a big fan of railways. And they did a great job. They said between May 1 and May 26, the special Shramik trains, the Shramik trains of, you know how many people they carried in those 26 days? 91 lakh. Almost 1 crore people in 25-26 days. Apart from that, millions and millions were on foot. Millions and millions were trying to take buses, get out in any way possible. And the media were simply asking, why are they going? You know, we're all such nice people. They should stay back with us. I think the migrant laborers made a very rational decision. They knew that nobody is going to look after them. They knew that. They knew that from their experience where they were brought up in the countryside, that nobody gives a damn. We were upset because we were losing our dhobi, our cheap labor, our servant lady, our gardener, our drivers. They were going back to their villages. And in fact, many of them told me, yes, we might die. We, in the People's Archive of Rural India, of which I'm founder editor, we focused on these people. We did 270 stories on livelihoods under lockdown. Many of them told me, yes, we might die, but better to die at home with the loved ones, amidst loved ones, than to die here amongst people who don't care for us. Yeah. So then you had the media asking the question, why are they going back? That was the wrong question. And it shows how little you know of the country. The real question was not why are they going back. The real question was, why did they leave their villages in the first place and come here? And the answer was 2 words, agrarian crisis. We never addressed, even today, where is that agrarian crisis in public discourse, which has seen 4 lakh farmers take their own lives in suicide? Your media are not serving you. They are not serving you. They are not serving the public. If they will not talk about rural India, at least let the rest of us talk about rural India. And, yet there are many more reasons why you need to be talking about rural India. Do you know that your constitution binds you? It binds you, the Constitution of India, which I take as the finest distillation, the finest essence of the freedom struggle, the ideals of the freedom struggle. It binds you to achieving justice for all, social, economic, and political. And it is not an accident, in my view, it is not an accident that the writers, the framers of the Constitution, put social first. It was a very deliberate choice. Social, economic, and political. And Tamil Nadu, and the other thing, what is the argument in the directive principles of state policy and in the preamble and in the fundamental rights? They are enjoining on you to build a great welfare state. My home state of Tamil Nadu has always sought to be in the forefront of both welfare measures and movements for justice. Yeah. And I think that it is absolutely imperative, when speaking of welfare state, just before this meeting, we were talking about it. I learned that the person who presided over the free breakfast thing is with us. I think this is a great scheme, and I think it is a fitting follow-up to the midday meal. I think this is the way to go. And to think that these are being denounced, these kind of actions and a number of other welfareist measures are being denounced as freebies, are being, doing your duty to the Constitution, to the promises and pledges of the Constitution of India. If that is for freebies, I want everybody to be for freebies. It is an absolute outrage that this sort of maligning of welfareism is going on. What is so important about free breakfast? What is so important about midday meal? Just consider, this is a nation that has fallen to rank 107 out of 121 in the Global Hunger Index. Rwanda is handling, which has had civil war and genocide for 10 years, is handling its hunger problems better than we are. Of course, immediately when this index, Global Hunger Index figure comes out, Government of India declares that it is a conspiracy against us. Then we are 100 and we are number 3 in the world in dollar billionaires. We did not have one before 91. Today we have $160 billionaires which goes entirely against the spirit of the Constitution, which calls for mitigating inequality, not only for mitigating inequality, but for ensuring that the resources of the society are not concentrated in the hands of a few. And you have $160 billionaires on the Forbes list who own wealth as of October 2022. Their wealth is equivalent to 24 to 26% of your gross domestic product. The top two billionaires, Mr. Ambani's personal wealth, if you look at the Forbes list, is greater than the GSDP of Punjab. Mr. Adani's personal wealth is greater than the GSDP of Haryana. And you want to know, and should you be wondering why all those farmers were so angry with these two gentlemen who were being handed over the agriculture of these states on a platter? So you really have a lot of reason to talk about rural India. Apart from 107 out of 121 on the Global Hunger Index, number three on the billionaires list, and 132 out of 190 on the UN Human Development Index, on the United Nations Human Development Index, and worst of all, 180 out of 180 in the Environmental Performance Index. That means we are at the bottom of 180 nations in that index. The only index that the government of India accepts as true is the Forbes index. How well we have done. An Indian is the third richest man in the world. So we are very proud of that. We need desperately to rebuild and to further build the welfare state that the freedom fighters, the freedom struggle, the Constitution of India envisaged for the people of this nation. And I think the justice must be our prism. Everything. I think when in my journal, you can talk about climate change, but in responding to it, we talk about climate justice. We talk about food justice. We talk about health justice. Look at what happened in the pandemic to people's rights to health. I want to draw this to a little close on the climate issue. You are Environmental Performance Index at the bottom, 180 out of 180. I think this is one of the issues of greatest urgency for policymakers and administrators, not making speeches at COP27. Please understand that Tamil Nadu is going to be one of the worst affected states in this. Coastal and peninsular India is already taking a big hit in climate change. It is taking a very, very big hit. And the most vulnerable peoples amongst you are fishing communities along the long coastline of this wonderful state. The fishing community, and many people don't believe it, don't seem to know that Tamil Nadu also has pastoral nomads, like the sheep herders who move between Tirunelveli and Thoothukudi. Okay? The ancient communities that have been around forever. It is quite frightening what it has already done to food production in many parts of the country. The wheat harvest in Punjab crashed with excessive heat. Yeah. It's interesting to me though that the ancient Tamils had a sense of the correct approach to agriculture. Not only in their divisions of land, classification of Kurunji and Mulai and Palai, not just that, but in understanding what crops are correct for what region. What crops should be grown where. All that has gone kaput in the last 100 years, and especially in the last 50, and severely in the last 30. You know, it becomes absurd if you're going to try growing paddy in Barmer because there is subsidy for paddy. It doesn't make sense. In Tamil Nadu, I really think, and it is very clear to me looking at the ancient Tamils and their literature, that they had a key understanding of what we desperately need to revive in our agriculture, which is an agroecological approach to agriculture. An agroecological approach. Consider that the ancient crops of Tamil Nadu, like ragi, these are, you find them embedded in Sangam poetry. You find 2,000, 2,500 years ago, people were writing about something, which means that it had already evolved over a very long period. If we cannot restore agroecology to our consciousness, believe me, we are in serious trouble. You will not be able to build climate resilience in your agriculture. And I think we are running out of time. And I too am running out of time. So I will just say this. We approach it. I think that the most important part of the Constitution today is the directive principles of state policy. What it promised people, a vision of what this country could be. And I think combining that with your preamble and your rights, everything we do, a policy maker, if asked to use a single prism, do it through that prism of justice. Thank you.
The floor now is open for interaction. The participants can ask questions with our distinguished chief guest.
I would like to ask a question about, so since you spoke about a lot about welfare state, nowadays, welfare state.
Yes.
So nowadays, a lot of talk is going about if we go more on the path of welfare state, we may end up crashing like Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka too had a lot of issues regarding giving tax breaks or giving a sort of free education, so sort of like that. And they did well in hunger index and all. But what happened is that their economy crashed this year, and because their debt levels have increased. Part of it is because of the Chinese debt as well, but part of it is because of the government fiscal policies. So how do you respond to those allegations that if we take up this welfare state?
I get it. First of all, Sri Lanka's external borrowings, there is plenty of literature in the last 5-6 weeks on how its problems came about. And it is not owing to one country called China. It has to do with the entire marketization and globalization process that all of our countries, including India leading the charge, has created for themselves. And the idea that to do welfarism will bring about a crash, when in fact the volatility of global markets, the volatility of and the fluctuation of the global structures that we have embedded ourselves into, that is what creates your problem. Consider this, that your economy shrank 7.7%. Your GDP shrank 7.7% in the first year of the pandemic in India. In the first 12 months, Indian billionaires doubled their wealth to $800 billion, or 24% of the GDP at that point. So did that happen by welfarism? It happened by loot and expropriation and exploitation. Secondly, if you compare over a 70-year period, and ever since the UN Human Development Index has come out from 1991, please note that Sri Lanka is far ahead of India in the human development rankings. Sri Lanka did not have a private school until very recently. Everything was government school. Okay? We enriched a small percentage of the population. Yeah. And it is when they start taking that same route of marketization and a lot of other things, plus they made some very stupid decisions. Very, very stupid decisions. Yeah. But those who know the truth are trying to build this narrative that it is due to welfareism. Okay, then if that is the case, then the states of Norway, Sweden, Denmark and Finland should have collapsed 10 times by now.
Yeah. So my name is Brito. I am an HM from Dindigul district.
From
Dindigul district.
Yeah.
My question is this. Down the years, Tamil Nadu is being ruled by the Dravidian.
Sorry?
Down the years, Tamil Nadu is ruled by Dravidian parties.
Uh-huh.
So Tamil Nadu has made a welfare state. But now is a criticism that, freebies given to the people as well as to the students is being criticized on the one side. My question is, freebies, whether it's an investment or taking away the responsibility from the people.
Okay. I did address this in my intervention itself, that it is outrageous. It is outrageous to call this freebies, to use this argument of freebies to deny people, to deny human beings their minimum necessities. And it comes from an attitude of total class and caste condescension. That is where it comes from, this attitude. Okay. Now, incidentally, I remember when in the early 1980s, when Tamil Nadu pioneered the midday meal, I remember the cartoons in newspapers making fun. There were cartoons in all the national dailies showing all the teachers will become cooks. 10 years later, the United Nations holds up Tamil Nadu's midday meal scheme as a model for the world to follow. Yeah, I am proud of that. And I am proud that the state had the courage to hold to its commitment to its people and not be put off by the great editorial writers of the national dailies. And there were mercifully no such TV anchors at that time. Okay, so that midday meal, remember in 1991 when hunger deaths started coming again, many activists went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court mandated that a midday meal scheme on the lines of Tamil Nadu will be nationally, statutorily mandated. The whole country, it called upon every state in the country to formulate a similar program. So I don't give, the freebies in India don't go to the poor. In your budget, by the way, because I wrote about it so often, Government of India in 2014 deleted it from the budget documents. And they have revised it in a way that you cannot make out the figures anymore. Do you know that every year from 2006 to 2013, please see the Hindu, I wrote about a small annexure in the budget called Statement of Revenue Foregone. Statement of Revenue Foregone. Do you know what are the main elements of Statement of Revenue Foregone? 73,000 crores on corporate income tax. And by the way, the biggest concessions on import duties were for gold and jewelry. All those poor laborers and servants, they're buying gold and jewelry, importing it. Every year, between 100 to 140,000 crores. I calculated for the full period for which data are available from 2005 to 2014. Do you know how many rupees we have given to the top 1% of the population? That's a freebie. 43 trillion rupees. 43 trillion rupees, you can run the NREGS 100 days program. You can run it for 25 years on more. You can increase the number of working days to 200. So I don't take this stuff about, coming from, it comes from absolutely people with no empathy for other human beings. I don't accept it one bit.
So thank you so much, sir.
Please.
Good evening,
Yes.
sir.
Hold the mic close, please.
Good evening, sir. Sir, my question is, you spoke about agroeconomy, right? Agroeconomy.
Agroecology.
Yes, agroecology.
Yeah.
But given the population pressure, we need more land, right, sir? We are in demand of land. So, if we should feed the population, we must need more irrigation, and the agroclimatic zones will break, right? So, what will be the solution, sir, for this?
See, first thing, the idea that your food production is not enough to feed your population is a myth. Globally, it is a myth. The UN FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, has a report, SOFI, State of Food Insecurity. Yes. You can see that from 2013-14, they have said it 3 times, 4 times. The present food systems are enough to support a population of 14 billion. 14 billion people we can support. The fact is that people don't have purchasing power. People are not able to afford the food. Great example I will give you during the pandemic. August 2020, my dear, you had 104 million tons of so-called surplus food grain sitting in the buffer stock. 104 million tons. What did we do? 5 kilograms per person. And what did we do with the rest? We exported it. Okay? The food was there. We were not willing to commit it to our poor people and to the hard-working laborers of this country. Do you know one of the earliest cabinet decisions of the Union cabinet during the pandemic? One of the earliest decisions was to permit uncapped amount, you can look at April to August 2020, to permit an uncapped amount of rice, not wheat because it's rice only that you can make it from, to be converted to ethanol, to create hand sanitizer for people who don't have water to wash their hands twice a day. We destroyed huge stocks of food grain, or we permitted the destruction of huge stocks of food grain. So it wasn't an absence of food that was the problem. The problem is, are you honoring the right to food of your people, which is implicit in your constitution, in your fundamental rights, in your directive state principles? So the solution is to implement your constitution. The solution is to honor the right to food, or what I would call food justice. The solution is to honor the Constitution's call to fight inequality and exploitation. It tells you that in so many words, to mitigate inequality. When you take all those measures, they are all within your Constitution. And I don't care what major demographers or economists think, because I think I know what I want to be, what brought this country to independence and freedom. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Sainath sir, my questions to you is there any concrete solution to address the landless laborers here? Okay, in Tamil Nadu there have been a lot of one of the massacres, like even many here. Most of the landless laborers belong to Dalit community. Is there any concrete solution to be taken by the government of the various states?
I think absolutely you put your finger on not just Tamil Nadu, but a burning problem across the country. Absolutely. And I think one of the I think it is an unfinished task of the freedom struggle, an unfinished task of this entire nation, that we have not addressed the problem of landlessness and of landless labor. We have not done that. And it is not as if there was no legislation. The abolition of Zamindari Act, all these things. In the first 10 years after independence, you have a lot of legislation on it, which we have subsequently been undoing. In the case of Dalits, where land was redistributed, please note that in many SEZs, land distributed to Dalits 40, 50 years ago has been taken back from them. Yeah, and put into an SEZ. So you have your land system, your ownership of land system is fundamentally unjust and based on an unjust order mediated by class, caste and gender. So if we cannot produce that social reform, justice, social, economic and political, if we cannot produce that, then as a nation we have failed. The mission has failed. I think it can be done. I think you can do it. You have had examples in this country where land has been redistributed. But I also think that climate change and climate justice is going to force us to go in much more for collectives and cooperatives in agriculture rather than individual ownership. I think that is also one possibility we need to imagine. Where when I look at one great example of a route or a pathway to justice, I look at the Kudumbashree of Kerala. Okay? By the way, the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes are very well represented in the Kudumbashree movement. And their slogan, by the way, is, we work with government, never for government. They're autonomous, they work with government. In fact, I think that they give government a raison d'etre for living, for being. They give a reason for government's existence. And I think the kind of impact, by the way, unfortunately, they are the only small farmers I have seen in the country who have made profits for 15 years until climate change put a paid to that 3 years in a row. A lot of everything in there, they were the ones who taught me this food sovereignty and food security are very outdated. We believe in food justice. That is, what is the food justice? The producer shall never go hungry. Right? I believe also that the old slogan of land to the tiller was misplaced. I believe it should be land to those who work on it. Right? I think if we start moving on those principles, I think there are pathways.
One more question is, our state is, Tamil Nadu is very strong state in implementing the welfare schemes.
Yeah.
It was ridiculed by the former Chief Justice of India, indirectly mentioning the powerful speech made by the Finance Minister of Tamil Nadu before he retired, a former justice. Then what is the reason behind this anger against directive principles or welfare schemes from your perspective?
See, the thing is, even the government of India's own documents, the government of India's own data show you how much more advanced Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka are in human development compared to what is now being projected as the model state of the universe, Gujarat. Please, if you look, say, I mentioned about online education. If you look at the one NSS report that they permitted publication of, they killed the NSS report on consumption, they did all that, but one NSS report they published in 2019, probably because the bureaucrat in charge didn't understand it. It has very devastating tables. It's called Key Indicators of Social Consumption in Education. Okay, it has 5 tables. It shows you, those 5 tables are how many households have computers, rural, urban, total, state, in each state. How many people above the age of 5? What percentage of persons above the age of 5 can operate a computer? How many families, how many households have access to internet? In rural, urban, total, male, female, total. How many households, how many persons above the age of 5 have access to internet apart from computer? And finally, what is the total, the numbers of percentage of people who have actually used the internet in the 30 days preceding the survey? You know what it shows me? I wish I'd had the time. I would pull out my pen drive and show it to you. It shows you that the states which we are now condemning as welfarist, as if welfare has become a bad word, they are the most egalitarian states relatively egalitarian compared to all these other states who are supposed to be a model. Women in Kerala, rural women in Kerala and internet do better than men in Gujarat. Okay, so, have a sense of what I'm saying. It is that welfarism which they call, it is also in these cases, it is I think Gujarat or other states. Certainly women in Kerala in the use of net are ahead of men in several states. Whatever Gujarat is, it is far below, in all parameters, it is far below the half a dozen other states. It's not in the first 6 or 7, right? But this is supposed to be the model you want to follow. Please follow it. I mean, my good wishes to Gujarat, let them follow it. Tamil Nadu and Kerala is number 1. Okay, the more egalitarian a state is, the more it shows in access to online education, to computers, and all these figures are before the pandemic. Imagine what happened to others during the pandemic. Yeah, and you have schemes here, freebies of trying to take education to people's homes. You have those schemes as well in the state. I don't care what you call them, welfarist, socialist, what you call them. Please implement them. I think they're good. Yes, sir.
Hello, sir.
Good evening, sir. I'm a retired civil servant.
Yes, sir.
I hope the senior policymakers here picked up a lot of points for their, policy making. You are always voiceless, and today you touch upon a very important issue of rural migration, agrarian crisis, and you also in the earlier response you slightly touched upon the point. How do we engage the rural workforce gainfully?
Yeah.
Can the government model, the J.C. Kumarappa's model, work now, need to be revisited now with whatever modification? And the second is, the cooperative movement is very, very important. AMUL is one of the successful model. My question is, can we replicate successfully the AMUL model in various sectors of the rural economy with active state participation in crop planning? We're very important. We are a very, very small landholding. We need to have a crop planning at the macro level. There, Udavar Sandai, for example, in Tamil Nadu, is a really very successful model, and it has bridged the gap between the consumer and the producer and the distribution of wealth. There is no middleman here. So we need to do away with the middleman, concentration of wealth in few hands. At the same time, we need to gainfully engage the rural, educated youth. So how do we address this issue with the cooperative and J.C. Kumarappa's economic policy in the core? Thank you, sir.
Firstly, I think we have to recognize how massive the challenge is with over 13 million youth entering the job market each year. Okay. Now, let me give you the great model state of Gujarat. There have been more investments in industry in Gujarat than in any other state, including investments which they have stolen from poor Maharashtra where I live, right? But those are investments, that huge industrial investments, which have produced minimal employment. You can find other industrial investments which produce per crore of rupees far more jobs than that kind of investment. So one question is, what do we invest in industry? Second, I have always had a problem, even with several of my progressive friends, who keep clinging on to the idea that agriculture is finished, we have to get all the jobs in industry. That era of industry is over. The complexes where you had 40,000 people working under one roof, it isn't going to happen. It is not going to happen in our environmental and ecological situation. It's not going to happen when climate change is such a serious business. I think there is still a lot of scope in agriculture, in forestry, and if we solve, as that gentleman said, if we address the problem of landlessness, if we are able to create collectives and cooperatives, we will bring down the use of hazardous inputs very significantly. That's one. Second, by the way, the poor maligned Sri Lanka reduced farmers' suicides considerably in 3 districts where it experimented with banning pesticides. Suicides fell because that is the weapon of the farmer in taking his or her own life. However, I'm saying, I believe forestry and building climate resilience through forestry, not through the stupid ways of the 50s and 60s of bringing eucalyptus or Kartakarvel. These were bad ideas. These were very bad. Now today you can't do away with that, Cassius juliflora. You're not unable to do away with it because the poor have become dependent on Kartakarvel for an existence. You have to find other kinds of forestry. You have to find other kinds of agroforestry. Believe me, it has great scope for employment of people. Per acre, you can employ so many people. It's also a question of whether you're going to look at forests and land as private entities to be owned by Ambani or Adani, or whether they belong to the nation and to the people. We have to settle some of those questions. But I believe, and I agree with you, that there are many pathways. That we haven't explored those pathways does not mean that they don't exist. So I think there is plenty of scope for providing employment. If we stop writing off agriculture, if we stop writing off a lot of other trades and occupations. Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Last question, please, madam.
Only one question. Vanakkam, sir.
Yeah.
நமது இந்தியால பாத்தீங்கன்னா பஞ்சாப்ல தான் பர் கேபிட்டா இன்கம் அதிகமா வாங்குறாங்க அப்படின்னு சொல்றாங்க. பஞ்சாபிஸ் அவங்க வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா மோஸ்ட்லி அக்ரேரியன் பீப்புள்ஸ். அவங்களோட ஃபுல் எதுவும் வந்து அக்ரேரியன் பேஸ்டு. ஏன் தமிழ்நாட்டில் அது மாதிரி நம்மளால கொண்டாட முடியல விவசாயிகள் கிட்ட அப்படின்னா அவங்களுக்கு இரிகேஷன் ஃபெசிலிட்டி கம்மியா இருக்கு. அதுக்கான வழிவகைகள் செய்து கொடுத்தா அக்ரேரியன், அதாவது அக்ரிகல்ச்சரல் டெவலப்மெண்ட் வந்து அதிகமாக இருக்கும். அது மூலமாக எம்ப்ளாய்மெண்ட் நிறைய கிடைக்கும் கிராமப்புற மக்களுக்கு. ஒன்று. ரெண்டாவது, நமது நாட்டில் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா ஒரு 50 இயர்ஸ்க்கு பிறகு அம்பேத்கர் சொல்லியிருக்காங்க, 50 இயர்ஸ்க்கு பிறகு ஒரு பிலாங்ஸ் டு விச் கம்யூனிட்டி, ஒரு கம்யூனிட்டிக்கு கொடுக்குற அந்த ஃபெசிலிட்டிஸை அப்படியே ரிவைஸ் பண்ணணும். யார் வந்து பொருளாதார ரீதியாக பின்தங்கி இருக்காங்களோ அந்த மக்களுக்கு வழங்கணும் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி அம்பேத்கர் அவர்கள் சொல்லியிருக்காங்க நம்மளோட கான்ஸ்டியூஷன்ல. அதை ஏன் இன்னும் செயல்படுத்தலை? இப்படிலாம் பண்ணும்போது மக்கள் வந்துட்டு பின்தங்கியவர்கள் மேலே வர்றதுக்கு வழிவாய்ப்புகள் கிடைக்குங்க. ரெண்டாவது, அது மூலமா படிச்ச இன்ஜினியரிங் ஸ்டூடெண்ட்ஸ்க்கும் நிறைய வேலை வாய்ப்புகள் இருக்கும். ஸோ தீவிரவாதம் ஒழியும். இதெல்லாம் என்னோட கருத்து. உங்களோட கருத்து என்ன?
First, actually, by the way, Ambedkar and others advocated nationalization of land. They advocated nationalization of land, which would have meant, which could have been a prelude to fairer distribution of land. Okay. You can also read the speeches of Nagappa in the Constituent Assembly and in the early days of Parliament. S. Nagappa, who says that we will forego reservation if you give us this. You know? So, I mean, that is one thing. But I would strongly advise you not to follow that model of Punjab, please. Punjab is on the cusp of a huge agricultural crisis. Its water resources are devastated. Its crop production is plateauing. Wheat has collapsed with the excessive heat waves. And unsustainable use of water and chemical inputs. This is not a wise course to follow. You will get, you see, the kind of chemicalized agriculture we use. It's like running agriculture on steroids. Okay? Suppose we take two twin brothers. And in a village, in our Gram Panchayat, we say, these two brothers, one will continue with his traditional diet, his traditional work. Both of them will do the same work. One will continue with his traditional diet, his traditional food, his traditional lifestyle. The other we will give steroids. And then we will see how both of them will function. At the end of 5 years, first 5 years, the brother who is on steroids will outperform the brother who is on regular diet completely. 3 times, 4 times. At the end of 10 years, the brother who is on steroids will be dead. Right? I'm saying that attraction of expanding production massively by means that are unsustainable. And that has happened in the Green Revolution states of India. We are paying the price for it in Maharashtra, where I have lived for the last 40 years. And I have seen this. I was the first journalist in the Hindu to carry the scale of farmers' suicides in this country. I hate saying it. I have visited over 900 households where farmers have taken their own lives. And I've seen what the economics of these farmers is. I've seen what their inputs are. I've seen what has happened to them. And I will strongly say agroecology. Do not be seduced by this kind of quick results. I can understand the farmer's position. He needs his money. He needs to pay off the debt. He's got to pay the children's school fees. All these things are there. But it's a very short-lived period. I think that we return to principles of agroecology and also to the principles of justice that he raised about who controls land, who takes the decisions on technology and use. Yeah.
அவரோட பதில் வேணும்
Please,
சார்
please,
எனக்கு.
please.
அம்பேத்கர் பத்தி நான் சொன்னேன் இல்லைங்களா,
So,
அவரோட பதில்
so one
வேணும்.
question.
இந்தியன் கான்ஸ்டிடியூஷன்ல
What-
அம்பேத்கர் அவர்கள் ஆஃப்டர் 50 இயர்ஸ் ஒரு பின்தங்கிய மக்களுக்கு கொடுக்கப்பட்ட சலுகை அது பொருளாதார ரீதியா
Madam?
பின்தங்கி இருக்கக்கூடிய மக்களுக்கு கொடுக்கணும் அப்படின்னு சொன்னார் இல்லைங்களா. அத
Sir
பத்தி
has answered it.
I'll just answer very quickly. See, I'm not sure I have understood your question, but for me, the most important speech ever made the most important speech ever made in a legislative body in this country, the most important speech on India as a democracy, India as a future, was made by Bhimrao Ambedkar in the Constituent Assembly on November 25th, 1949, as they handed over the draft constitution to the Constituent Assembly. And he said, we have entered a world of paradoxes today. We have built democracy in politics, a political democracy. But in society and economy, there is no democracy. The lack and absence of democracy in society and economy, which people today sometimes, if you try to correct that, they call it welfareism. The lack of democracy in society and economy will one day explode our political democracy. How true it is, not 50 years ago, but 70 odd years ago, he said it. 70 odd years ago, he said it. 73 years ago. That you will destroy your democracy by injustice and inequality. I think that we have to hark back to that speech, and it is also that finds reflection, the principles of that speach finds reflection in the Constitution of which he was the chief architect. So I think that we have to give that extreme importance and rescue that Constitution from what it has been reduced to. Thank you.